Welcome back to TAP, the Art Project. The artists I'd like to introduce you to today are the Florida Highwaymen. In 1950s Florida, nestled amongst fields of orange groves and swaying palm trees, halfway between Daytona Beach and Miami, you'll find the Treasure Coast. A great American road trip destination, tourists visit year-round to take a break from the everyday hustle and bustle, to see all the curiosities the Sunshine State had to offer. This was also a racially segregated South. Racial segregation is the separation of people into racial or other ethnic groups in daily life. In Fort Pierce, a city within the Treasure Coast, was a segregated neighborhood known as Blacktown. And in this neighborhood lived a promising young painter named Harold Newton. Harold Newton was born on October 30th, 1934 in Gifford, Florida, but grew up in Tifton, Georgia. One of 17 children, he quit school at an early age to help his family by working in the cotton and peanut fields. A self-taught and naturally gifted painter, Harold found an escape from the grueling field work in his art. He began by painting religious figures on velvet, a popular trend at the time. Known for his charm, it was said he could sell a jacket to a mosquito in summer. After selling several paintings from the trunk of his car, he realized he could earn as much from his art as he could in the fields. Around the age of 20 in 1954, Harold moved back to Florida's Treasure Coast, where he saw greater opportunities to sell his work. Settling in a modest home near Avenue Q and North 17th Street, Harold wandered into the studio of A.E. Backus, a successful landscape artist whose works were displayed in local galleries. Backus, a trained artist with a style rooted in the Hudson River School, painted nature in a soft, romantic way. He was also known for his progressive views, particularly his opposition to segregation. Harold spent hours at Backus's studio watching him paint and then attempting to replicate what he saw. When he showed Backus his paintings, the artist was impressed and encouraged him to focus on landscape, as those were in high demand among art collectors. While Backus sold his paintings for around $250 in galleries, Harold sold his from the trunk of his car for just $25. Backus worked on canvas, while Harold painted on Upson board, a cheap, large sheet building material that could easily be cut into smaller panels. Harold would prop up the board outside and use unconventional tools like a pocket knife, spoon, and even his thumb to create beautiful scenes of natural Florida. Once he had a collection of paintings, he'd load them into his car and drive from business to business, stopping to sell his work to eager buyers. Occasionally, he'd be chased away, but more often than not, people were happy to purchase the affordable, well-executed art for their homes and businesses. What do you think of Harold Newton's work? Around the same time, give or take a couple of years, a young, charismatic man named Alfred Hare was just a 9th grade student at Lincoln Park Academy when his teacher recognized his artistic talent. She knew A.E. Backus and thought it would be a good idea to introduce Alfred to the successful artist. Alfred Hare was a fast learner and quickly picked up the style and techniques Backus taught him, then developed his own method. Alfred also sold paintings from door to door, but had much bigger aspirations than the quiet, simple life Harold had created for himself. Alfred wanted to be rich before the age of 30. His desire for independent wealth fueled him. He knew the more paintings he could sell, the quicker he'd reach his goal. He also used Upson board to keep the cost of materials low, and was known to work on 15 to 20 paintings at a time and complete a painting in under 15 minutes. He even worked out to build up his endurance so he wouldn't need to take breaks. He hired family and friends to sell his paintings and painted so fast the paintings were sold wet. Slowly, like magnets, young Black artists found their way to Harold and Alfred's doorstep. While they didn't know it, Harold Newton and Alfred Hare were the beginning of what would soon become a brand new art movement. An art movement is a style or tendency in art that is shared by a group of artists during a specific period of time. Alfred Hare taught his brother-in-law, Carnell Smith, who helped paint the backgrounds in Alfred's landscapes. Isaac Knight started out as a salesperson for Alfred and taught himself to paint by observing Hare and repairing smudge paintings. George and Ellis Buckner started in the early 1960s, but preferred selling their paintings in art shows in Miami. The brothers worked in orange groves until they realized they could make a day's wage with one painting. Al Black drove a 1962 Ford Galaxy and was a legendary salesman. If he received 25 paintings that day, that's how many he sold. An artist since childhood, Al also quickly developed his own style of painting. He even engineered the deep trim others began to use on their paintings, which allowed for paintings to be stacked, preventing them from smudging while on the road. Harold Newton taught his brothers Sam and Lemuel and James Gibson, then Roy McClendon, the Daniels brothers, and Livingston Roberts. Curtis Arnett learned from Roy McClendon before studying art independently and developing his own style. Charles Walker, the brother-in-law of Livingston Roberts, had a preference for painting in natural settings, often incorporating wild turkeys and other animals into his artwork. Willie C. Reagan, recently back from his service in the Army, was delivering newspapers in a station wagon when he first noticed Harold painting outdoors. Intrigued, Willie initially focused on selling Harold's artwork, but soon discovered his own artistic voice. Drawing inspiration from the scenic landscapes of Vero Beach, he began creating what he called panoramic paintings, skillfully capturing sweeping, expansive views that spanned the entire canvas. Harold also taught the only female painter of this art movement, named Mary Ann Carroll. Mary Ann Carroll was around the age of 16 when she noticed Harold painting outside. She once said Harold can make color come to life in his paintings. She asked if he'd show her how to paint like that, which he did. After some time and a lot of practice, Mary Ann also developed her own style for painting Florida's landscape. She painted at night and volunteered to drive Harold's salesman around in exchange for lessons and the opportunity to sell her own art. By this time, Mary Ann was a wife and a mother. She was relieved to be able to provide for her family while doing work that she loved. She said, selling paintings put bread on the table, and once made $72 in a day. Her husband made $35 in a week. At a time when opportunities for Black people were quite limited, this community of Black painters carved out a path to live life on their own terms. It is estimated that there are around 26 landscape painters total during that time. Some knew each other and some didn't. Sadly, in August 1970, Alfred Warner Hare was shot and killed during a disagreement at a local gathering spot called Eddie's Place. Things just weren't the same after that. Years later, in the early 1990s, a businessman, hoping to bring more awareness to Florida's art history, wrote an article that included the group of Black folk painters from Fort Pierce. It said, "Thus was born a movement, a school, a Black self-taught tradition that I recognize as the beginning of Florida's residential regional art tradition. Within that movement, which could be called the Indian River School, was a subgroup that I've labeled the Highwaymen. It was this subgroup that was responsible for feeding the demand for regional art all across Central Florida. The label Highwaymen stuck. Since then, demand for work from the young group of Black artists, now known as the Highwaymen, has grown, and many of the painters who'd moved on returned to painting again. Those that never stopped were grateful for the newfound demand in their work. If you are one of the people who bought a painting by Harold or Alfred, it may have a value of up to $200,000, specifically if the painting includes the iconic poinciana trees. Once dismissed as motel art, Florida Highwaymen landscape paintings are now cherished and highly collectible. They vividly capture the state's natural beauty and charm before urbanization reshaped the landscape. The end.